welcome to Conversations. This is your host, Michael Stone, and I have a really unique and fascinating guest today. John Lockley is a senior Sangoma in the Xhosa lineage from South Africa. He's also known as a traditional healer, diviner, or spirit doctor. And Sangomas are traditional African shamans who were called by the ancestors to apprentice under another Sangoma to receive transmissions or the gift of healing. John is the founder of the Way of the Leopard teachings, which is a unique teaching system to help people from non-shamanic cultures to reconnect to their inner wilderness, their bones or ancestors, their dreams, and the natural world. John, welcome to Conversations.
Thanks, Michael. My pleasure.
It's really lovely to have you, and I really enjoyed your book, The Leopard Warrior, A Journey into the African Teachings of Ancestry, Instinct, and Dreams. And I thought we could start with an overview of, this Irish immigrant was born and raised in apartheid South Africa. You were a medic with the Black Special Forces, and you were a South Korean Zen Buddhist monk, and then you got initiated into a Black African culture as a Sangoma, which is a traditional shamanic healer and teacher, as we said. So tell us about your journey. Just give us a little overview here.
There's so much to say, That's why I ended up writing a book, because it was all so much. Yes, so my journey really started, as I've said in the book, my journey really started in Dublin in the 1950s with my mother. And she had a dream about African elephants. And that's what, she had a vision actually, when she was walking on the pier near the sea. And she had a vision of these elephants coming to her. And she had this absolute fascination and love of Africa. And that's what propelled and inspired her to go to Africa. And her first stop was Rhodesia. In those days was Zimbabwe. And that's where she met my father. And then she encouraged my father to go into the bush and to look at wildlife, in particular the elephants. And that's how my journey began, because I was born in Cape Town, beneath Table Mountain, with a mark of the Xhosa sangomas around my eyes, which is this kind of white birth clay around my eyes. And as I came out of my mother's womb, my mother said to the doctor that I looked like a little Aborigine, this white clay around my eyes. And of course, the doctor was shocked, because it was apartheid South Africa. And so he smiled, he was shocked, as white doctor. And my dad laughed, my mother laughed, and then the Xhosa nurses ululated. So I think, and then it was a number of years later, at the age of 16, when I started getting these calling dreams, the dreams of the spirit calling me to train in a particular kind of way. And the first vision I had was really of walking in the Amazon looking for gold. And I was still at school at the time. Like I say, I was 16, and it was a dream. So it was a nighttime experience. I was asleep, and in the dream, I was walking and searching through the jungle looking for gold, and I found the gold. And I found the gold, and it was a wonderful moment finding this gold amidst the jungle. And as I woke up, there was a woman's voice that said to me, in order for me to connect with my destiny, I needed to come close to death. And it was kind of a shocking revelation, but I was excited. I know it's strange, but I was excited. I was like, wow, I want to connect with my destiny. But in order to do that, I have to come close to death. And at the age of 16, I knew kind of what that meant for me, because as a white boy in South Africa in apartheid, we were conscripted and drafted into the South African army. So I knew that in a couple of years' time, from the age of 18, I had to go into the South African military. But one thing I was lucky about, I was able to choose what sections of the armed forces to go into. And because of this dream and my feeling that I wanted to be a healer, that I wanted to help people rather than hurt people, I chose to become a medic in the South African army. And I applied for that, and I was accepted. And because of that dream, I had a feeling that I wanted to go to the front lines and be a paramedic, or what we call in those days an operational medic, because we had a terrible war going on for 10 years in Angola, and it was just on our border, and a lot of the soldiers were sent to Angola. So I had this feeling about being trained as an operational medic to go to the front lines and experience death, you could say, but also help people over the other side. So fortunately, the Angolan war ended just before I went into the military, and where I was drafted was a military hospital. And in the military hospital is where I started learning the crafts of becoming a healer. And in particular, the calling of becoming a Sangoma was crystallized and focused in the military hospital because of all the suffering, all the death, all the pain that I experienced. So the first assignment I had was looking after soldiers from a special forces battalion. And most of the soldiers were black soldiers. And it was my first experience in working with African traditional culture. And even though I went to a private school where there was no apartheid, so we had all colors of the rainbow, black, green, indigo, every color of the human race we had at that school, I wasn't really familiar with apartheid growing up because of my private schooling. I really became familiar with apartheid and discrimination in the South African Army. However, it was strange because even though there's a strong sense of discrimination in the country, in the military hospital, everyone was treated equally. And even the senior officers who made very racist comments, I must say to you, very racist comments, they still showed equal attention and, you could say, loving care for all their patients, didn't matter what color they were. So there was this contradiction. Incredible racism and bad language, but at the same time, they treated all their patients equally. In fact, one of the doctors who was a senior doctor, he even pulled me aside one day and he said, medic? And I said, yes, sir. And he was a colonel, like I say. And he said, how are my men doing? And I knew what he meant. He meant black special forces guys, because he was so enamored with the way that they could heal so quickly, how their bodies could heal and how they never complained. They never complained once. And he said, what do they need, John? And I said, sir, they need more cream because they're massaging their bodies with this cream to help heal their bodies from all these wounds. And he says, anything you need, John, you just tell me, we'll write it down and we'll get it sent in. And I said, okay, thank you, sir. So I wrote down vitamin E cream, vitamin A cream, and then on top of that, there was also various kinds of vitamin drinks and vitamin B drinks to give the people energy. And I was amazed because he was known as quite a racist guy, but when it came to healing the soldiers, he was acting like a top doctor. So I noticed these senses and these contradictions in humanity. I noticed in the military. And one of the things I could share was one of my first Sangoma teachings that I experienced in the hospital, and I was 18 at the time. So every day, and I can teach what I can share this with the listeners, because it's a very powerful story, and it really affected me deeply. So if you can imagine, the ward has got a number of different rooms, and because apartheid means separation, and the white people were separated from the black people, in the different rooms within the ward, we'd have, black soldiers, or we'd have white soldiers, and so on and so on. But they'd all be in the same ward, and they would all be given equal treatment. But there was this slight separation in terms of different rooms. Anyway, so every day I'd walk into the one particular room, which was just the black special forces guys. And I walk in and I'd open the curtains, and I would just say, good morning, guys. Did you have any good dreams? And I'd say that because of my own background with dreaming from an Irish mother. And every day the guys would keep quiet. And then on the third day in a row, I said, good morning, guys. Did you have any good dreams? And again, everyone was quiet. And suddenly there was a voice at the back of the room. It was Sergeant Ndlovu. And he was the head of this particular platoon of special forces operators. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, come over here, medic. I want to speak to you. So I went to the side of his bed and I said, "Yes, Sergeant. How can I help you, Sergeant?" And he said, "Medic, Private, in my culture, dreams are very serious. When I dream, my ancestors show me who's going to live and who's going to die in my platoon. I tell my men, this is your time, your ancestors are calling you. They laugh at me, but they still die. In my culture, dreams are very serious. Please don't ask me again whether I've had any good dreams or not." I said, "Yes, Sergeant, sir." "Of course, thank you, Sergeant." And I never asked him again. Now, the interesting thing with him was that he was becoming a Sangoma. He was a Zulu man, and he was an apprentice, and he was going through the calling illness, the trials and tribulations and sicknesses of being called to become a Sangoma. And all the nursing staff, all the black nursing staff were giving him gifts every day, looking after him and pampering him, because he was a very powerful man and had a very strong gift. I could feel that. So that was my first Sangoma teaching. And I knew intuitively what he was saying to me, because I'd been called from the age of 16, but there was no one I could speak to because I was this white boy. And interesting enough, and I never realized this, why I did this, but I never went into the rooms of the white soldiers and asked them if they had any good dreams. I never did that. I don't know why. I just intuitively never did that. And it's not that I thought that the black soldiers were better than the white or vice versa. No. For some reason, I felt I could talk to my black soldier friends about dreams, whereas I felt I couldn't really do that in the same way with my white colleagues. And why is that? I don't know. I don't know the reason for that, but look what's happened 30 years later.
So you yourself got this illness, I think you call Twasa or something like that, that leads to your shamanic studies. Talk about your own struggles with your illness and how then you went through the Zen, South Korean Zen monastery, and then eventually ended up going into the training with the Kosa Sangomos.
Yes, I mean, amongst traditional Sangoma cultures around the world, there's what you call the calling illness. So you don't choose to become a shaman. If you choose to become a shaman, it means your ego is calling you, not your soul. So people don't, generally in indigenous cultures, they don't choose to become a shaman. The spirits or the ancestors choose you to become a shaman. And the way they do that is through dreams, and often through a profound illness, which can bring the shaman or the initiate close to death. Because as the initiate becomes close to death, they learn the lessons of empathy and compassion, and they learn to let go of the ego and the way they look and the way all these kinds of things that we have are trappings with our body, we have to let go of. So in the Southern African tradition amongst the Sangomas, we have the illness we call the Twasa. And the Twasa is the calling illness. And generally someone is only trained and apprenticed if it is shown that they are suffering from this illness. And because it's a sign that the ancestors are calling them and that they need to accept the calling and they need to find a teacher. So through accepting the calling, the illness abates. Through working with a teacher who gives you herbs and ceremonies, the illness gets easier, and then you are shown how to work with your gift. So in my particular case, I was sick for 7 years, and it was quite dramatic because the way the sickness affected me, like it does with a lot of indigenous traditions. I had a lot of dreams and a lot of prophetic dreams, but the dreams came along with very extreme physical sensations. So my immune system was very weak, even though at nighttime I was very psychic. So the more psychic I got, the weaker my body got. So I got all kinds of different kinds of illnesses because my immunity was so low. So I got hepatitis A, I got dysentery, I got bilharzia, I got glandular fever, tick bite fever. I broke bones. I came close to I had a couple of near-death experiences. I had a lot of high temperature in my body as well, a lot of fevers, which is quite a classic symptom are the fevers, because your immune system is weakened, but also your body goes through this profound cleansing. And the way the body is cleansed is through fever. So I had a lot of high fevers, which I'd wake up at night where I was sweating profusely and my body was very hot and I was losing a lot of weight. And then after that, my dreams went to another level and they became clearer. So each time I went through what I call a healing fever, my dreams got clearer. But it was a very difficult time because I had no guidance. The only guidance I received was meditation. So I'd meditate every day. And in the evenings, I would receive visions after my meditation or during my meditation. And then at night, I would receive very strong dreams, which would show me where I needed to go, what direction I needed to go. And like I say, I knew that I had to find a teacher, a Sangoma teacher. But apartheid being what it was, and me being a white boy from a middle-class background, I wasn't able to find a teacher because, well, it was against the law for whites to go into the township. You couldn't just walk in. There was a big military presence and police presence. You could go in as a soldier or policeman, but to go in looking to work with a traditional healer, if you didn't have contacts, it just wasn't possible. So in my dreams, I was encouraged to carry on working with the Zen tradition. And I was told that I needed to practice hard and that one day I'd find a Zen master who was going to train me. So I went to university and I started supporting a meditation group, and I became friends with someone who was working who had her own little Buddhist meditation center. And then after about 6 months of hard meditation, someone said to me, there's a Zen master coming from South Korea. And he came into our meditation center. And interesting enough, this is quite relevant because I was sharing this here at Inside LA, here in Beverly Hills, because the Zen master's name is Zen Master Subong, but he originally comes from Hawaii. And last year, I was at the Ram Dass retreat, and I had the great fortune of meeting Trudy Goodman and her husband, Jack Cornfield. And I thanked them for the beautiful talk that they shared. And then I started talking to Trudy, and I told her that my background was Zen Buddhism, and my teacher was Zen Master Subong, who comes originally from Hawaii. And she looked at me and she said his layman's name. And it turned out that she was a good friend of his, that her ex-husband was best friends with him. So she knew him from way back.
Wow.
She knew him from way back. And then she ended up having a session with me, and we were both in tears because it was such a strong connection. And that's what precipitated another chain of events that brought me here to Inside LA, here in Beverly Hills. But going back to the story, I remember with Zen Master Subong, when he came and he was with us, he was able to juggle you can't say contradictions in the human system between this kindness that we all share with each other, but yet also this violence that we commit to one another, because he came at the heights of apartheid. And he passed away tragically in Hong Kong. And now I'm coming back to America, and America now is dealing with a lot of conflict. But I remember one day with Zen Master Subong, when he was talking to us, and one of our retreats, he came out of the meditation and he hit his Zen stick hard on the ground, and he pointed over the hill to the township where the Xhosa people were living. And where there was, like I said, during apartheid, you had black people living in one place and white people living in the other. So he pointed over the hill to the Xhosa community, which I ended up living with and working with. That became my community. And
that was also the community of Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, right?
Yes, I mean it's the same tribe, but they wouldn't necessarily that particular community, but they part from the same tribe, the same part of the country, which was the Eastern Cape. But I remember Zen Master Subong shouting and saying some kind of demonstration is needed. And we all looked at one of our mentors, who's a human rights lawyer, Anthony Osler, who was doing a lot of work to spread equality and human rights in all sectors of the community. And at that stage, I was only 21. I was very young. And I felt that what I needed to do was go over the hill, but it was still apartheid. So at the end of that retreat, I had a lot of visions, and I was very sick, and I had to drop out of university. And then I said to Zen Master Subong, please, sir, I want to go with you to South Korea and possibly become a monk. I'm not sure. And he said, you're welcome. So that's why I went over to South Korea with him, and I trained with him. And then his teacher, Daesun Sunim, who was the head of the lineage of this Korean order, he also trained me, and he also gave me interviews. And because I was so sick, I was able to go and have treatments with his doctor, his Chinese doctor. And they treated me with acupuncture and herbal medicine. And it managed to help the Twaza illness, but it didn't go away completely. But the fevers carried on all the way through the South Korean winter of 3 months. I had a high fever. So I was suffering a lot, and I was meditating. I was exhausted, and I was dreaming, and I was going through a lot. So I remember looking outside the window at the height of the silent retreats and watching snow fall and feeling my body burning up with this fever. And then going to the Chinese doctor, and then having acupuncture put in my body to help me get through the 3-month retreat. So whenever I needed help, they said to me to just go to one of the Chinese doctors in the group, and I'd tap on his shoulder, and he would turn from the meditation, and in silence, he'd walk to the back of the room, the tea room, and he'd get his needles out, and all in silence, I would sit cross-legged, and in silence, he would put the needles through my body, all over my body. And then after 10 minutes, we'd bow to each other, and he would go and meditate, and I would go and meditate. So that's how I got through 3 months. 3 months of meditation in a Korean winter. That's how I survived with this burning fever.
I've been in the Korean winter too, 2 of them actually, so I know how bitter that can be. Well, let's move forward now and talk about coming back and entering the training and the initiation and your journey back to Ireland to discover your roots and your ancestors.
Yes, I mean, it's a big question, that, Michael, but I'll try and do my best. So my training involved 10 years of apprenticeship, and during that time, I would train intensively for about 3 or 4 months, and sometimes it would be up to a year I'd be training during that period. And then during that time, I went to Ireland because I was called by my mother's people, who are my people, my mother's parents and grandparents and ancestors. So I went to Ireland in order to ground myself with my own ancestry. And that's when I made a lot of friends in Ireland, and in particular musicians, which is quite interesting because the word Sangoma means people of the song. So the people I automatically gravitated to in Ireland were folk musicians, traditional Irish musicians. And they are prolific dreamers, and they taught me the gift, 2 Irish gifts. They taught me the gift of humor and the gift of music. And the gift of humor and laughter was very important for me because as I was training in a South African township, which is very tough because of the poverty and a lot of death due to AIDS and TB and all kinds of illnesses, I'd often come back from my training period over those years. I'd return to Ireland, and I would be quite distraught because some of my friends would have died, and I would have encountered a lot of hardship and a lot of poverty, a lot of sadness. And my Irish friends managed to buoy my spirits up through laughter. And I remember one particular situation where I came back from South Africa, and I was really dealing with a friend, some former colleague who had passed away tragically, and also illness and other things I was witnessing in the township, which were very, very painful and very sad. And I remember sharing with a good friend of mine the story, and he was listening to me, and he said to me after a while, I hear you, John, this beautiful Irish accent. And he said to me, but I don't know Africa, John. I don't know Africa. I just know you. And we could carry on talking like this, John, but I could see you just going to get sadder and sadder. And I don't want you to stop talking, John. I want you to carry on. And I want to help you, John. But I don't know Africa. I don't know the people there. I just know you. I'll tell you what, John. Miriam is playing a gig down the road, some really good tunes. Why don't we go and have a pint down the road? And I'm not telling you to stop talking. Feel it, feel it. But let's go and listen to some music and see if it'll help you. So we went, and he said it in the most diplomatic way. And I really felt the truth in his words, because what he helped me to do is to focus on living, even though I was dealing with lots of elements of death.
Mm. A good lesson.
So my Irish colleagues and friends really taught me the art of dealing with melancholy, dealing with depression, and also dealing with lots of tragedy. My Irish friends taught me how to deal with tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In your particular lineage too, there's quite a focus on ancestors and our relationship to our ancestors. Before we get into the initiation and some of that, why don't you talk about the ancestors and why that's so important? And because I think we're really orphans here, particularly in North America, in terms of our ancestry. Most of us really don't have a great sense of that or a deep connection like many other cultures, Asian and indigenous cultures.
Okay, well, I mean, ancestors and working with ancestors isn't just the Xhosa tradition. It's the whole of Africa. And I can speak very closely about the Sangoma tradition, not just the Xhosa, but the Zulu, the Setswana, the Pondo, the Pedi. All of the Sangoma traditions and lineages in South Africa will work strongly with ancestors. And in fact, all the traditional healers in South Africa will work with ancestors, and probably the whole of Africa. So this notion of working with ancestors is not just an African concept. It's a universal concept. And it's always there when people are connected more deeply to the earth. So let me speak a bit more about it. You know, in terms of the African system, we say that if you want to connect with the other worlds, if you want to connect with your life path, if you want to connect with your spirituality, if you want to connect with your human potential, your Ubuntu means your humanity, you have to connect with your bones. You have to connect with your ancestors. And the reason is very simple. It's like we come into this earth plane as a drop of consciousness. We come in from the Great Spirit. So you could say the Great Spirit is the great dreamer or the creator or whatever you want to say. The Great Spirit drops this consciousness in, and it's birthed through mother and father, these two physical creatures. We are earthed through mom and dad. So in terms of Buddhist terminology, if I can use that, because a lot of people in North America and Europe will be familiar with Buddhism. In Buddhism, we talk about the three jewels: Buddha, which is enlightenment or the shining; Dharma, which are the teachings; and Sangha, which is the community. So as this human consciousness is dropped in, we are birthed through our mother and our father. They are our first Sangha. They are our first community. And they are the bedrock on which we rest our humanity. So our mom and dad are connected to two lineages: the lineage of the female, the lineage of the male. And when people want to start a spiritual journey, the most important thing to do is to just say a prayer of thanks for the gift of humanity to their mother's people, and just say their names and say thank you. And then you can say a prayer of thanks to the father's people and say their name and just say thank you. It's not about worshiping your ancestors, because a lot of Europeans misunderstand that. It's not about that. It's about honoring the gift of life that you have received from your mother and father and your ancestors down the family tree. And as you do that, just say thank you. Just a quiet meditation of, I come from these two groups of people, and I thank my mother's people, and you say the name. Thank my father's people, and you say the name. So saying the name of your people is very important. So in my situation, I come from the Kellys in Ireland and the Lockleys in Nottingham. So I would just say thank you to my mother's people, the Kellys. And then I'd say thank you to my father's people from England, and not originally from Nottingham. And what happened to me when I started doing this? Now, this is very interesting. As I gave thanks for the gift of life to my mother's people and my father's people, they came to me in dreams, and they opened the road for me in terms of my life, my profession, all these things. And I just need to add in another thing, sorry. We would honor and praise our blood ancestors, which is mom and dad, because that's your root chakra. That the bedrock of your humanity rests on the root chakra of your humanity, of your mom and dad. And that's your Sangha. But then the next line of ancestors, which you would also honor, is your adopted ancestors, which are those wisdom keepers that come to you from other traditions that adopt you spiritually and train you. So in my case, it's the Xhosa, because they have officially adopted me as a Xhosa man into my teacher's family and into her tribe. So I would always honor and praise my teacher, Mam Gwevu, and her ancestors, as well as her husband, the Sugwinis. And I would also pay respect to my Korean and Zen tradition, because I've been adopted by them spiritually. So when I'm teaching people, I would always say it's a triangle. First, you honor and praise the Great Spirit, this consciousness, the dreamer, Krishna, this consciousness dropping into us. We would honor and praise the Great Spirit. And then on the left, your mother's people, right, your father's people. So the Sangha is being recognized and honored. And then if you have adopted ancestors or traditions that are supporting you, you honor and praise them. Now, what happens to a lot of people in Europe and in the West, they have great shame when it comes to their ancestors because of war, because of colonialism, because of abuse. And it's much easier for them to put on their fridge a picture of the Dalai Lama or Nelson Mandela or some other kind of guru. And, the gurus are sexy. They look good, they're beautiful, they're just shining lights. And I say to people when I'm giving public talks, if it's easier for you to honor and praise Nelson Mandela and the Dalai Lama than your own relatives, you've got a problem. And that's okay. Welcome to the human race. Welcome. Welcome. Wamkele kila ubuntu. Welcome. Because the job of being human is a difficult job. It's a challenge. And it starts with family. If you have problems in your family, that's where your consciousness should be focused on. And all you do is you just say thank you for the gift of life. And you do not condone bad behavior in your family line. All you do is give thanks for that consciousness that's been passed on to you through this family line. You just give a bow of thanks to them. And as you do that, the sense of dignity starts coming into you and your family tree. And then the dreams start coming. So this is what I teach. It's a fundamental teaching of what we call Ubuntu, Bubuntu, which means the depth of humanity. And it's also a fundamental Buddhist teaching, because in Buddhism, the Sangha, the community, is very, very important. So nowadays we have lots of education of mindfulness in the West. We have lots of Buddhist and yoga education. But I think people are missing the fundamentals of the Sangha, which means your community. It means your mother and father. It means your ancestors. It means your bones. It means bowing and giving thanks to your people first.
Doesn't Ubuntu also mean sacred reciprocity, the exchange of energy? Isn't that also a big part of it?
Yes, it's all to do with relationship, Michael. Relationship. Mm-hmm. It's almost like our job here, or our lesson as human beings in this earth realm, is to understand the relationships we have with each other and with the plant world, the insect world. It's all to do with relationships. Mm-hmm. So that's the element of reciprocity we're having to learn. And it starts with developing a relationship with our own spirit. So when we start on the Sangoma journey, the first thing we have to learn is how to connect with our own spirit. Not the spirit of the jaguar or the leopard or the elephant. It's first your own spirit. So I wouldn't come for training with my teacher or even been given the calling if I hadn't had a profound connection with my own spirit and the Great Spirit. because once that happens, once your own spirit is in pain and it's suffering, it's a sign that your soul is starting to speak to you. It's a bit like the salmon. The salmon has a call, and that call means it needs to swim upstream. And it swims upstream despite the rapids, despite its head being hit against the rock and going, oh, 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 it's so, oh. And it keeps swimming upstream. And the reason is because there's only one voice going through the salmon, and that's the voice of nature, Mother Nature. And that one voice is saying, you have to go upstream, darling. You have to go upstream, because then you're going to make nice little babies at the top. And sweetie, I know it's difficult. I know you're going to hit your head so many times. But sweetie, my darling, the most important thing is that you swim up this river and you get to the top. So the salmon is so connected to the voice of nature. It doesn't have the ego. It doesn't have the mind we have. So there's no dualism. There's no conflicting thoughts. It's just up the stream, find the spawning ground, make the babies, listen to the mother. That's it. So human beings, we have to connect to the soul or the spirit of the salmon inside ourselves, which is our own spirit, which is the connection to Mother Nature. And that voice needs to become louder than Facebook or social media or the outside world. So we have to bring our awareness inwards and occupy our inner world and connect with our soul. That's the first lesson. That's the first job.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I would say from my own practice that there's so much suffering, and at the heart of that suffering is always a sense of separation, of separateness, of not being connected. And so it really speaks to what you're saying, this Ubuntu. Now, so we've talked about the ancestors and our relationships and Ubuntu, but there's a whole nother area, and you've mentioned many times your dreams. So talk about the relationship of dream time to entering into the shamanic or Sangoma path.
Okay, thanks, Michael. With the dream time, I just want to go into the concept of the dream time. I mean, all cultures speak about the dream time, and Buddhism, yoga, all cultures speak about, and even Christianity, they speak about us coming from this immaculate blackness, this nothingness. And in Buddhism, they talk about gati gati, paragati, parasamgati, bodhiswaha, which is the Heart Sutra. And it says that we come from this nothingness. So if you can just, if the listener and ourselves, if we can just imagine we come from the space of nothingness or universal consciousness or this matrix, this plasmic matrix, and our consciousness is dropped into this world, and it comes from, you could say, the dream, the great dreamer. And it comes from the dream time. So the Bushman people in the Kalahari Desert would say that, and the Bushman people are probably one of the oldest indigenous tribes in the world today. And they would look at the stars and they would say that this life is a dream being dreamt by the great dreamer. And in the Zen tradition, we'll say that all of this is a dream and we have to wake up from the dream. So if we can just imagine that we all come from the dream time, this place of nothingness, this matrix, this collective consciousness. And when we die, we're going to go back to that space. And every night, we die, because every night we sleep and our consciousness drops into that space, that void. So what's important for each person is to remember their dreams, because as they remember their dreams, their nighttime dreams, when they're sleeping, as they remember those dreams, they connect to that space before they are born. They connect to the essence of their soul, but they also connect to their life purpose.
Wow. Okay, so we've got dream time, we've got ancestors. You spoke a little bit about music and dance, but that's another aspect of your particular lineage. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned it from the Irish sense, but as a Sangoma, what's the role of music and dance?
Oh, that's a good question. So music and dance is, in terms of the Sangoma tradition, is the way that we pray, the way we connect to the divine. So we sing in terms of we chant. So the songs are called ngomas, but they're really chants. And as we sing, there's the rhythm of life connects with us, and then the sound of the drum connects all of us. So the drum is very powerful because it's a heartbeat rhythm, and that heartbeat rhythm connects all of us, connects the whole community. So we sing and we pound our feet and we dance, and this is our prayer to the Mother Earth, and this is the way we connect to the divine. And it's the same in Ireland with the traditional Irish sessions. It's done in a circle, and the music and the rhythms, what creates what I call the vortex energy. And that vortex energy is a particular kind of energy that takes us out of our thinking mind and into our soul, into our bones. And as we do that, we get the sense of epiphany or visions or a sense of intuitions come to us. And it's like that for everyone. You know, if you go to an Irish session in Dublin, for example, a traditional Irish session, and you listen to the music and you have a few pints and you just completely drop into your heart, something will come to you. You'll get a vision or intuition, something will happen. The same in South Africa when you at a traditional Sangoma session and the drums are going, the songs are going. At some point, you will have a realization or an intuition or a feeling, or just feel love, or you might feel a sense of sadness, or all kinds of emotions you'll feel. But what you will feel more than anything else is your heart. You'll feel your soul. You'll feel your heart.
Mm. So, John, let's talk about your initiation ceremony. I'm really interested in it. There was a sacrifice involved, and I'm talking about the final initiation, the ceremony that went on. Can you just take us through that a little bit? And I was a little like, oh, they're still sacrificing animals. And I realized that there are many cultures that are still doing that. So I was very interested in that ceremony that you did.
Yes, I know this is very difficult for a lot of listeners, but this is the way they do it in Africa, and we need to pay respect to the culture in Africa rather than judge. So if people do feel a sense of discomfort, then I ask them to please keep an open mind and, most importantly, an open heart, because African culture needs to be respected and not judged, because for too long Europeans have judged Africa and they've judged traditional healers. And part of me writing this book is to say, stop, listen, open your heart with an inquiring mind rather than judging. And I also need to say that a lot of cultures, all the indigenous cultures in the world, use animal sacrifice. So the Mongolian, the Siberian, the Huicholi, all of them. And I'm not making judgment, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is part of the human race, and this is part of our connection to animals and to plants and to nature.
Well, talk about the blood too. Talk about the relationship of the blood and the sacrifice. And it isn't you just kill the animal, you eat the animal afterwards too.
Well, actually, we don't kill the animal. We sacrifice the animal. You know, there's a difference between slaughter and sacrifice. And the difference has got to do with prayer, and it's got to do with the way an animal is treated. And often that animal will choose you. So often, like for example, in the Bushman and the Khoisan and other traditions, and in the Xhosa, we will speak to a group of goats and we'll say, brothers, we need one of you to go to the ancestors and give a message to the ancestors. And this is what happened to me with one of my ceremonies. We spoke to the goats and we said, brothers and sisters, we need, well, I actually would say brothers because we use a male goat. And we say, brothers, we need one of you to go to the ancestors and become our emissary, become our ambassador, and go to them and give a message from us. And this is what I saw. And I was with the group of elders and I spoke to the goats. And then the herd boy called the goats away, and one goat was left standing. So we said to the owner of the goats, is this goat available for us to buy? And he said, yes. And the goat just stood there and just pounded its feet into the ground. And then when we touched the goat, it started crying. And then all of us said Kamago, which is a sign that the ancestors Siyavuma, the ancestors have agreed that this animal is going to be the emissary to go to the other world. So I really encourage people to see this in a whole different way and open your heart, open your mind, just feel it and see it in a whole different way. This animal is actually seen as an emissary, as a messenger, and they are treated with a lot of dignity, a lot of love, and they are seen as messengers going into the other world to give a message to the dead, to the ancestors, who are not seen as dead, they're seen as alive. So with us, we say that in order to connect the electrical impulses or the life impulses of this world with the other, we have to use blood, because blood is red and blood is the connection between all of life. So blood, life, creates life. And the way we create life is through prayers, is through dancing, and only in extreme cases, animal sacrifice. But only in extreme cases, which means the extreme cases means the person has to have a dream. You don't just go in and just take an animal and just kill it for no reason. Unless it's for food and the people are hungry, that's a different kind of thing. And I don't judge that, because people have to live and they have to feed their families. But in terms of a medicine ceremony, this person has to have a dream. The initiate, the Sangoma, has to have a dream where the ancestors or the ancestors are calling for this kind of blood to feed the vortex energy, the energy of life. And it's very difficult to explain to someone who's not initiated and who doesn't feel this and who doesn't have these kinds of dreams. Because you have to remember, I came from a very strong and very strict Buddhist background where there was no killing. And it was very difficult for me, you can imagine. However, I had a dream where the animals were being called to the Great Spirit in this particular kind of way. And when I saw this, I knew that animal sacrifice had to happen. But it had to happen in a very peaceful way, in a way that is in harmony with the universe, that's in harmony with nature. And we have to be very careful of our thinking minds and our egos and drop into the world of nature. And this is the world that I'm opening up to people through my writing. And this is the world that was opened up to me through the Xhosa Nation and through my Sangoma colleagues. It's not the world of the Western way. It's the world of nature. It's the world of indigenous shamans and healers. And this is the world that we all, regardless of what color you are, what ethnicity, all of us have to enter the world of nature, which means dropping your thinking mind, opening your heart, letting go into the earth and feeling what is the earth saying to you.
Wow. I'm reminded as you're speaking of that, and we're getting close to the end, that the animal's blood is like your blood, red. And the same thing is true of, you came out of apartheid and this huge separation between black and whites. And I'm sure that you've had many people say to you, John, what are you doing, this Black African tradition, and here you are, a white guy doing this. I mean, you must get a lot of eyebrows raised, and yet, you're very much of that tradition and teach the ways of this particular lineage. So talk about that dichotomy, and I think there might be a learning in there for all of us about our connection with nature and humanity.
Yes, I mean, in the early days, yes, it is difficult, and it's still very difficult for me, but all I can say to people and to listeners who are judging, drop into your heart. If you are judging and you feel prejudice, welcome to the human race. If you take action with your judging and you take the next step, there's many names to that, and it's not love. Love is about looking at another human being with kindness and listening to them. And if you're interested in my story, then I encourage you to drop into your heart and to just listen. So at the end of the day, I was invited into the Xhosa Nation to become a Sangoma. I never asked them to make me a Sangoma. I never forced them or said anything like that. I was invited by the elders of the Xhosa Nation through my teacher and other elders to become a Sangoma. And they said it a number of times, John, you have the dreams and the calling, welcome, come into our home. And I was anxious in the beginning, and I was unsure because of apartheid and being a white boy. And I said to them, what does it mean to become a Sangoma? And my teacher says, what it means is that you're going to be able to help people in all different ways. The ancestors are going to move through you, and you're going to stop being so sick. So to people who are unsure of this journey of mine, all I can say is that I was adopted, trained, and loved by Xhosa elders from Nelson Mandela's tradition. And if you have a problem with that, then I encourage you to take it up with them. And I must tell you, they will tell you straight. Ndaba has the calling. Uthixo came to us, the Great Spirit came to us and told us that we need to train him. And we are listening to the Great Spirit and our ancestors. And if you have a problem with us, you speak to the Great Spirit, you speak to the ancestors. Because we, as Sangomas, are teaching the way of Ubuntu, the way of humanity. So if my story activates people, good, because we need to become activated. We need to look at the way we're treating one another, and we need to engage with one another with actions of humanity, which involves kindness, involves love. And when we love, we listen and we don't judge.
Beautiful. So John, it's time to really close, but I'm wondering if you could do a closing prayer or song for us, just to let us drop into that space that you provide for people when you're doing your work.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you, Michael. So this song comes from South Africa. It comes from the depth of my initiations. It comes from my teachers and my family. And it's called Uthixo, which means the Great Spirit. Oh, Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu. Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, abazali bamu, abazali bamu, abazali bamu, ya ya, ya ya. Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, Uthixo amu, ya ya. Hayi siyanqola amanyanga sinqothixo siyanqola abazali bami sicamako siyabulela sicamako uvulela amanyanga sicamako fundisa abantu ukulandela ubuntu bobuntu sicamako siyabulela camako. So I'm honoring and praising the Great Spirit, all our ancestors, and I ask the great ones to please teach the people the depth of humanity, ubuntu bobuntu, so that we can stop the warfare between us.
John Lockley, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, for your just big, generous heart, for your new book, The Leopard Warrior. And from Sounds True, it's a journey into the African teachings of ancestry, instinct, and dreams. Quite a story. At the end, there's some wonderful practices and teachings that I highly recommend people to take on, and just much gratitude, my friend.
Thanks. Thanks, Michael. Thank you very much.